Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is redemption. So many of us are crippled by guilt and shame from the past. And what we're going to look at what it looks like to find our way beyond that. And maybe that path is through redemption. I just want to have a conversation about that word and that whole topic and dynamic. So it should be, as always, an interesting conversation. I so appreciate the opportunity to engage with you about all these topics. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating and electrifying, energizing all your molecules, all your electrons, all your cells, creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the tickling and the tingling and the temperature, the sensation, and allow that sensual experience to bring you present to your body right here, right now, into this amazing physical form that allows you to experience life. Welcome, Rosalind. Good morning. So good to have you here with us. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Today, we're talking about redemption. And what prompted this, and I don't know if you guys ever experienced this. It's a very bizarro kind of experience, at least for me. I don't know if it came on because I haven't not slept well this week. And last night I didn't sleep well. And I woke up this morning with images and thoughts, recollections of all kinds of instances in my life where I have done things or said things or acted in ways that I wasn't particularly proud of. You know, as we look back in our lives, I think we all have ample opportunity to be looking at experiences that could be crippling with guilt and shame. And I think so many of us carry that, and it really can be paralyzing. So I just woke up this morning with all these things coming through my mind, and over the years, thankfully, I've gotten to a point where I can allow myself to be witness, a compassionate witness to these I'm going to call them transgressions. Now, I know that that's judgment, right? I know, but I also had thought about calling this transgression and redemption rather than just redemption. When we talk about transgressions, I think fundamentally what we're looking at is a breach of our own values, our breach of we may have made transgressions in other people's vantage point, from other people's vantage point as well. But really, I think that a transgression resides in our compliance with that perception or with our experience of having breached our own boundaries. Anyway, being able to look at the experiences of our lives and to recognize that those experiences were coming from a certain perspective, coming from reactive trauma, or we get 20/20 hindsight in a way. We get the ability to be looking at a bigger picture. And I remember years ago, a friend of mine had been through lots and lots of stuff in their lives and had been going to therapy for quite some time. And in the context of therapy, the therapist talked about gaining a tolerance to be able to tolerate these experiences, to be able to tolerate seeing what was so, rather than trying to avoid or push away or judge. And as we find a greater tolerance, I think it's not just tolerance. I think the path to the freedom from all of this, and the path perhaps to redemption, if there's such a thing that we want to ascribe to or subscribe to, is to recognize a larger context for experiences, to see, maybe we were acting out from previous pain and failure, or experience of or interpretation of previous pain and failure. Maybe we were following patterned behaviors that we had been taught and that might have been invisible to us. This was in my reverie this morning. I was recognizing some generational patterns in my family in some of the behaviors that were kind of going before my eyes. It was almost like the life assessment that someone might go through, when they die, to see all the high points and the low points. And what I was seeing, I wasn't seeing all the triumphs so much. I was seeing just a lot of these instances that in the past really truly would have crippled me with self-hatred and self-loathing. And now I can look at these things and say, wow, this is very different behavior than what I would consciously and deliberately choose to continue. Anyway, let's look at this idea of redemption. So again, I'm a nerd. So I did my nerdy thing and I looked up the word redemption. And of course, it's talking about redeeming, but it says an act of redeeming or atoning for a fault or mistake or the state of being redeemed, deliverance, rescue. And again, an atonement for guilt, and then repurchase as of something sold. So we've been doing a lot of linguistic gymnastics this week, looking at some of the paradoxical definitions within words. And we see that here in the word redemption, where we redeem something, like redeem a coupon, for example, then I'm getting something in exchange, right? I'm receiving. Whereas to redeem oneself is, in some sense, to be able to give. I mean, what is atonement? It's making a gesture or expressing a certain, it's giving of oneself. Well, you know what? I'm just going to look up atonement because I don't want to presume. And atonement, it says satisfaction or reparation for a wrong or injuries. So atonement is giving reparation, and it's talking about reconciliation, which was one of our earlier words during the week, is atonement, is it reconciliation rather. So I think redemption is an internal experience to a very great degree, just as transgressions are interpreted internally. I'm curious about what your ideas are about all this. I think the notion of redemption comes from a desire for freedom, freedom from the overwhelming burden of guilt or shame or past wrongs, for example. And to find redemption is to be able to find freedom from that. And so how do we redeem ourselves? Typically, like if I've violated a trust with someone, then I'm looking to redeem myself with them, to prove to them that I'm worthy in some way, shape, or form of their forgiveness. So this redemption thing, I think, is intimately linked with forgiveness. So Rosalind says, how does worthiness play into redemption? Beautiful question. You got right to the heart of it, Rosalind. In the context of someone not feeling like they have purpose, how does someone work toward healing from their past? That's what we're looking at exactly. Rewriting and reframing history, including having compassion. Exactly. So looking at our history, we can look at behaviors, and this is something that I do with myself and I do with my clients. So many of the behaviors that we do not like in ourselves are behaviors that have been learned. And I don't know that there's a lot spoken about this because, we get to be personally responsible, right? We get to be responsible for our actions. So we often look at our actions in the context, in the limited orbit of our own being, as an isolated event. And what we're not necessarily seeing is that so much of that behavior is a function of our environment or the environment in which we grew up. We learned emotional responses. We learned what kinds of behaviors are acceptable. We learned all kinds of ways to interact that could be highly dysfunctional, right? But we perpetuate those things because that's what we know. And it's not, and it's invisible to us because we don't know any different. So as hopefully as we evolve, we get to recognize what these behaviors look like in a larger context. We can fallout from them. And when we get something, perhaps we can look at the fact that these behaviors are part of a larger whole that we were conditioned to, that we didn't even know we were conditioned to. And that might begin to give us some leverage to move out of that pattern, and also to have compassion for ourselves, as you're talking about, Rosalind. To be looking at, wow, I see, there were all these psychic wounds, there were all these conditioned behaviors, and wow, look how it played out, look what it cost. And to feel that, I think we might start out with guilt and shame, and then the next layer is sadness, to be looking at, wow, that's really a shame that, or interesting choice of words there. It's just sad, to have been at the effect of life rather than at cause. And so healing from our past is a process of shifting our awareness of context. I think that that's really the foundation of being able to heal from our past, because we can move into forgiveness, but having context makes that possible, right? When we have a context for understanding, then we can have a deeper compassion for ourselves. When we can recognize the woundedness that behaviors came from, if we can recognize the almost automatic kinds of patterns that behaviors came from, we can find more compassion. And I think this bird's eye view, this 30,000-foot view of our matrix of inner relationships and behaviors and experiences can give us greater understanding. And I think that compassion often generates from understanding. I mean, compassion can also generate from presencing ourselves to love and sharing that love not only with others but with ourselves, but looking from a higher view rather than taking it all so personally, rather than personalizing all of our behavior. I just was looking at all these things in my life, and I was seeing certain patterns, and also was able to see those kinds of patterns in family members. And I have to say, it was a first for me to be able to see these dichotomies in myself reflected in other members of my family and in other people. And as we can recognize ourselves as part of a greater human family, we can depersonalize our histories somewhat. And I think that can give us a space of, or give us an access to forgiveness and redemption. So the thing I wanted to be looking at with this word redemption, very much like some of the other words we've looked at this week, is that it has the polarity in it. It has the polarity of giving and receiving. So the atonement piece is the giving, like giving giving of, I don't want to say regret, but maybe giving of awareness of ourselves, giving giving understanding, giving an open-heartedness to be able to atone. And if we look at the word atonement, it's at one-ment also. And so I think, what we're looking at is finding a harmony, a unity, when we recognize that as human beings, we're all things. We're not just shiny people. We all have our darkness. We all have our aberrations from our norm. Like, let's say here's our norm, and every now and then there's a blip that is unaccounted for, in our mainstream way of being. So Rosalind says shifting the focus of our thoughts. Once someone becomes aware of the undesired, being able to have less reactiveness, being able to see the undesired thoughts without judgment. That's exactly what we're talking about, Rosalind. So maybe we're giving compassion in order to be receiving forgiveness. And this is even all within ourselves. So Rosalind continues, over time, the reaction and focus of thoughts will change 100%. 100%. So as we give generosity of spirit, as we give a willingness to be present, as we give an open-heartedness, and then we can receive the compassion, we can receive the forgiveness, we can receive the redemption. And that consequently gives us freedom. Good morning, Gia. So good to have you here with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And welcome from the Netherlands. So good to have you here with us. We're talking about redemption, and really what we're talking about is how to heal guilt and shame that we have carried from our lives that can be paralyzing. The inclination in the face of behaviors that we're ashamed of or feeling guilty about is to deny them, to bury them, to resist them, to push them away. So from the Netherlands, I just needed something positive right now, feeling so down. I'm so sorry you're feeling so down. And I think that you're not alone in feeling that way. Sometimes when we feel down, that's part of it is feeling so alone. I think that in terms of positivity, what we're talking about is being able to stand back from our circumstances, particularly relating to guilt and shame, and recognize that we are part of a bigger web. We are part of a bigger fabric of existence. And we can observe these instances if we can find a way to be present to these instances within our lives that might be bringing guilt and shame and self-judgment, and step back and see it in a larger context. If we can depersonalize it. Now, I'm not saying resist it, I'm not saying deny it, but if we make it less about us, like if we remove ourselves from the stories of, oh, this and this and this happened, and therefore I'm a terrible person. If we can step back from that and say, wow, isn't that interesting? What was going on there? What were the dynamics? And if we can look at it with some sense of distance, then it gives us a greater capacity to see things perhaps more clearly in the context of something larger. Like I was looking at these things in my life this morning, and it was very fascinating to recognize, wow, that same dynamic, like I was seeing familial patterns, but on a much deeper level, like a much more nuanced level. And when we recognize that those behaviors are not something that is ours alone, then maybe we can give ourselves some freedom from that. Maybe we can give ourselves a bit of a break to say, wow, okay, that's interesting. Now that I see a little bit more deeply into that, now maybe I'm free to make more choices. I keep looking back because I have a green screen back here and I hear the tape releasing. So like it's maybe going to fall any second. But anyway, I hope that from the Netherlands, that this conversation is what you needed to hear today, to be able to free yourself from whatever those heavy emotions are. It's an interesting time of year. We just came through the holidays, and people are struggling with COVID, and it's winter, and there are so many factors that can be influencing our emotional environment. And Rosalind says, maybe we can be our own cheerleader. For sure we can. Up there it goes. So that my background just fell down, and now we're back to the old brick wall that used to be the background, because I am going to be doing an interview in a little bit for Sustainability Now. Anyway, so the magic of shifting gears, right? So that's what we've been talking about, is shifting contexts, and now you got a beautiful actual experience of it. Anyway, Rosalind says, maybe we can be our own cheerleader. How can we comfort ourselves, be our own best friend? Taking away from external or limiting social gatherings might appear as depressing, but allows room to remove distractions and to reconnect with ourselves. So thank you for that, Rosalind, for sure. Sometimes social interactions support us. Sometimes they make things more difficult to address. So we each have to gauge that ourselves. In any way, in any case, I want to say thank you for being here. And I hope that this was for life-changing moments with Annette. I guess your name is Annette. So Annette, I hope you are feeling somewhat relieved and uplifted, and can be more generous with yourself. Do something kind, do something that gives you joy, give yourself freedom to find things that will help to lift your spirit. And so with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. It is both pleasure and privilege to be here with you. I so appreciate you. So Annette says, I thought having my awakening last year, I wouldn't be that affected by what people are saying about me. And that's the thing with awakening. We keep getting to practice it. It's unfortunately not a once and done. And we keep getting to grow with it. And Dido, great to have you here as well. Always so much love to you all. Until next time.